Hello! Welcome to my channel. My name is Elise and I'm so happy to be with you all today because we are going to be ranking all of the short story collections that I read in 2022. I'm very excited. I love short story collections and I was able to get to 10 short story collections in 2022. I definitely want to get to more this year, so we will try and boost that number up. But I wanted to give you a ranking of these, so if you're interested in checking out other short story collections, you might be interested in some of these. So hopefully there are some recommendations in here that will work for you, and we will go ahead and dive in. So the one that we have at the very bottom, I don't own anymore. So, that's probably why it's at the bottom. This is Modern Times, and this is by Sweeney. I had such high hopes for this book. I talked about it sometime earlier in the year, and I love the cover of this book. So I'm so sad I don't have it anymore, but I just couldn't justify keeping it because I didn't really like it. This was supposed to be like some experimental surrealist literature that was kind of like out there and shocking in some way. One of the stories that it talks about on the back is this woman who is so obsessed with her husband's penis that she decides that she wants to start taking it to work with her. So she brings it to work with her every day. And it's kind of got stuff like that going on. That's the vibe. And this ranged from what I would call flash fiction all the way up into some longer short stories. And the longer ones work better for me. I just feel like the flash fiction, I was like, why? I didn't get the point of what was happening. And with short stories, I think it's such an amazing form to be able to like have you question something or really make you think. And that's what I enjoy about it. And this, I just didn't get that with it. I was confused some of the times and was just like, okay, I read that and like, what? I don't know. So that is Modern Times, probably not the strongest recommendation, but if you're just so intrigued by what I said, go ahead and pick it up. The next one on the list is Happy Stories Mostly. This is by Norman Erikson Pasaribou, and this is published by Tilted Axis Press. This one was longlisted for the National Book Award last year, and that is what originally put it on my radar, but it sounded great. So this is all supposed to be queer short stories in one way or another. And I should say this is translated from the Indonesian by Tiffany. And yeah, I don't even really have a strong recollection of this collection. It was very meh to me, like just okay. The one story that I do remember is there is a man who goes to somewhere in East Asia and is looking for someone to fall in love with, and he finds a sex worker and becomes overly familiar and really conflates lust for love and niceness for true affection and intimacy, like so many men do, unfortunately. And I really loved that story, but that is probably the only story that I remember, and I think for the most part I just felt pretty meh about them. Yeah, ultimately for me this was pretty forgettable, and that's why it's so low on the list. All right, next one on the list is one I talked about recently, and that is The Haunting Season. This says it's ghostly tales for long winter nights, and this is an anthology, so various different authors, and it is exactly what it says. It's ghostly-ish tales that are meant to be more leaning on cozy and wintry than scary. So if that sounds intriguing to you, this might be one to pick up. This cover is also just stunning with the gold foiling. This is the UK cover. I specifically got the UK cover because I don't like it as much as the American cover. But this one had some wins and some losses for me. I did enjoy that it was a collection that wasn't inherently scary, and it was just like all about like the cold and like feeling like kind of suffocating and like that very moody atmospheric vibe, which I enjoyed about this. My favorite in here was the Eel Singers, which is done by Natasha Pulley. And I will try and look for something by that author in the future. And it involved this man who has mysterious power to see potential outcomes. So it's not necessarily going to happen, but it's a potential outcome. And a lot of them are very dark and violent. So he goes with his partner, he's queer, to this town and bring their adoptive daughter along to this place that he experienced kind of clarity of mind. So he doesn't have the visions that he would usually have. And all of a sudden, you start realizing why that might be, and it's slightly nefarious. So I loved how creepy that story was. It was definitely my favorite. So in here, there again, some wins and some losses for me. I would still recommend it if you like stuff that is kind of less scary and has a fantastical element to it. So that is The Haunting Season. This is published by Sphere. All right, future Elise here, spooky. I realized when I was editing this video that I just completely erased talking about 2 of the short story collections. So I'm inserting them here now where they belong in the list. So the first one is Blood Feast, and this is by Malika Moustadraf, and it's translated from the Arabic by Alice Guthrie. It's published by Feminist Press, and this was a collection that is very much about gender, it's about embodiment, it's about the gendered body as a whole, and yeah, has also a lot to do with sexuality, and all of that in the context of Moroccan culture, which is where this author is from. There were things that I really loved about this, and then things that just fell flat for me, which is why it fits here on the list. So I liked the themes, but I couldn't always track those themes across all of the stories, and that was slightly disappointing to me. I do like a really thematic collection, so that's just personal preference. If you don't care about this, this will probably be much more of a win for you. The writing is great. Yeah, some stories have really stuck with me. I also just appreciated the kind of scenes from Moroccan life. I think I've mentioned this before when I first read it, but I studied abroad in Morocco when I was in college, in undergrad. So it very much reminded me of my time there, and that just held a special little place in my heart. There is also a large chunk from the translator at the end that informs you about the author. I do think that is like kind of mandatory reading for the collection. This author died very young and was very much mistreated by their government, partially because of the things that they wrote about, mainly sexuality and gender. So I think that's important context to this story. There's a lot of anger throughout the stories, and that really shows through coming from the author. So yeah, overall, there were some hits, there were some misses, but if you don't need a really thematically collected set of short stories, then I think this will be a better win for you than it was for me. So that is Blood Feast. Next up, we have Through the Woods, and this is by Emily Carroll, and this is published by Margaret K. McElderly Books, I believe, and it is a collection of graphic short stories, and these are graphic horror short stories. It is YA, so it's not going to be like spooky, ooky, kooky, crazy. It's very like tame, easy to read, not going to keep you up at night. The last story is the best by far in the collection. This does something that I like where it tells a story that is seemingly normal, and then at the end it has a twist that all of a sudden makes the context of the rest of the story very unsettling. I really love that in a short story collection, and this does that. Again, the last story is really the one that stands out to me, which is partly why this is lower on the list, because some of them were just like so, I don't know, light that it didn't hit me the way I wanted it to hit me, but that's fine. It's YA, that's what it's meant to be. So yeah, if you're wanting something that is more like cozy horror, and as opposed to like scaring you, this is a great pick, and the illustrations are wonderful, so highly recommend for that reason alone. So that is Through the Woods. Now back to Pastelise. Next up, we have something I also read pretty recently, and that is Weasels in the Attic by Hiroko Oyamada. This is translated from the Japanese by David Boyd, and this is a collection of 3 stories that are all interlinking and follow the same cast. And the first one has to do with like some exotic fish and a new bride, and there's kind of like some eerie, unsettling stuff going on there. And then the second one follows a couple as they move out into the mountains, very snowy and atmospheric, and they are having a weasel infestation and how they deal with that. And the third one has them all come together after the birth of a new child, and they have a little dinner party and get snowed in together. So the theme throughout this, one of the big themes, is infertility. So know that going in. If that's a trigger for you, then it's in here for sure. I do think the representation was done really well, and it's an experience to add to the stories of the wide ranges of experiences that happen around infertility. So I really enjoyed this. This is my favorite Hiroko Oyamada that I've read to date and would highly recommend. It's so short. This is published by New Directions, who have published all 3 of her translated novels in the past. Yeah, and I highly recommend this. It was quiet and somewhat dry like her work usually is, but I think there was more kind of like thematic plot happening than in the previous 2 that I've read, because it is a short story collection. So again, this is very wintry. So if you read it during that time of year, that might be like peak way to read it. So that is Weasels in the Attic. Next up is a collection that lots of people love, and that is Milk Blood Heat by Dantiel Moniz. This is published by Grove Press. Now, this collection, I will say, took me a long time to read, and that's because the first story is so dark that I was not prepared. So know that going in, look up trigger warnings. I was not prepared for how dark it was, and I had to put it down for a while until I was able to pick the rest of it up. I will say, I think the first story is the darkest, but it is dark. So this follows a wide range of things. This follows, I would say, mostly women. I think most of the stories are following women who are, I don't know, experiencing some kind of like crisis or transition, or really like reflecting on something that might need to change in their life. So lots of that type of stuff going on. This is in some ways slice of life, but I would say it leans dark. Some of my favorite stories that I still remember, I read this at the beginning of the year, were one where a woman who is a bartender is sort of reflecting on her romantic relationship and meets this other enigmatic woman, and that sort of helps them, you know, discover some things about their relationship that maybe they hadn't known in the past. There's one about 2 young girls who are swimming and one starts drowning, and the lengths that they go to in order to save themselves, and it's very much a commentary on human nature. And there's one about a woman who finds out that she is pregnant and she has never wanted to have kids, and all the fear and complicated emotions that are wrapped up in that for her. So those are some of the ones that I remember and really stand out. Lots of these were very good, and that is Milk Blood Heat. Okay, next one is, we're getting into the top 3. So number 3 on the list is Anonymous Sex. And this is another anthology, so there are many authors in here, but this is edited by Hilary Jordan and Cheryl Lou Lean Tan. And this is sort of what it says on the cover. Maybe that's vague, but this is a wide range of short story collections about sex. And all of them sort of play out a different sexual scenario. And I think this collection is so brilliant in a number of ways. One, in the editor's note, they talk about how a collection like this doesn't really exist, where it's just a large variety of experiences around sex. So you can really get a wide range if you're trying to like expand your knowledge, if you're just looking for something erotic to read, to have it all compiled in one place and to have a lot of diversity within that. If you liked Kink, that came out a few years ago, I think you would really enjoy this as well. This is much longer, so there are more stories in it. And while Kink is focused on, kink and is very queer in nature, which is great. I love that collection as well. This one is an even broader range of experiences. So yeah, I love it for that reason alone, but the stories were just so fascinating and fun and thrilling and wild to read. And I just loved going back and dipping in and out of all of these stories that the authors had created. Yeah, I very much recommend this. If you enjoy reading about like a wide range of sexual experiences, this is definitely for you. I highly recommend picking it up. And that is Anonymous Sex. And I should say, this is published by Scribner. All right, next up is something else that I read pretty recently. I read it in December, so it was in my December wrap up, and just adored, and that is That We May Live. This is another anthology collection. This is a collection of speculative Chinese short stories. And this is published by Two Lines Press, which only does translated literature into English. And this is a part of their Calico series, which is a series in which they ask translators that they've worked with previously to let them know what work they've been seeing in the language that they translate in that hasn't already been getting published. And then they put these collections together, which I think is just such a brilliant and so needed, such a brilliant and necessary thing that they're doing, because yeah, I just can't imagine all the stuff that doesn't get translated that I'll never get to read, and translators would know, you know, best of all what should get translated and what's really great. So I love these collections. This one, like I said, is speculative fiction, and I adored almost all of them. So maybe the reason why this wasn't on the top is there's one story that I didn't particularly like, but even that, it's just because the other one was so good. So I've said before, my favorite story in here is about a news anchor woman who is kind of obsessed with beauty and youth because she thinks she's about to get phased out of her job, and she likes all of the power that comes with her job. And it's also about the ways that men will abuse their power, particularly in regards to women. It's like kind of dark and twisty, and lots of things going on there, lots of good commentary. There's also one about a fermented beverage that does some sort of mystical things, slightly sexy things maybe. And yeah, it's about the lineage and heritage of this and a woman who is trying to discover and learn more. So lots of amazing things going on here. Would highly recommend if you like speculative fiction. There were so many authors in here that I'm now going to find other work from. And I just love that about an anthology. I think that's, you know, one of the great things that you can use them for is to find new to you authors that you want to pick up some longer form fiction from. So that is That We May Live. And we're on to my number one short story collection of the year. And this is a pretty well-known one, I would say. And part of that is because it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. And that is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. This is translated from the Korean by Anton and published by Hanford Star. This one is kind of similar to the last one, where I would call it speculative, dark. I think this is classified as horror short stories. And every story in here is well done. Like, there wasn't a bad one in the bunch for me. Of course, there are some that like I loved more than others, but all of them were well done. And even the ones originally that I was like, maybe I didn't love that one quite as much, they have stuck with me the whole year. And I think that's partly due to how descriptive and how well done the descriptions were of the landscapes, of the people and the relationships, of the depravity and the despair, of the joy. And this really is a collection where each story is trying to make you think and reflect about something. Each story has sort of a moral, has a theme that it is really trying to hone in on and show you some of these really harsh, cruel realities that we are perpetuating, whether that be, you know, greed or power or whatever it might be. It's really saying like, look at this, look at what we as humans can do. And I love that. That is like catnip for me. I am about it. I like a story that is really trying to make me be reflective and think, and it did just that. So that is Cursed Bunny. Very much recommend, highly enjoyed, and I hope you pick it up. So those are the 10 short story collections that I read in the year of 2022. I can't wait for more short story collections in 2023. I already have so many on my TBR, so I'm going to be getting to some very soon. Please let me know any short story collections that you read in 2022 that you loved, or just some that you love in general. I think I didn't get into short stories until later on in my reading experience, and so I'm sure there are many that I do not know about. So please let me know those down below, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!